Hi, everyone. I truly hope this finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you today from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey. Beyond delighted to have this opportunity to introduce all of you to Naturopathic Physician, Medical Intuitive, Ancestral Healer, and Psychic Medium, Dr. Anne Charlotte Valentin, also known as Dr. Lotte, who will be speaking to us from Phoenix, Arizona. Dr. Lotte, who emigrated to the United States from Sweden, has 2 sons, a daughter, and a gold medal award-winning book in the category of spiritual leadership titled Med School After Menopause, The Journey of My Soul, in which she shares her 2 dramatic out-of-body near-death experiences, the years she spent healing her body and integrating her amazing spiritual experiences, being prompted by a spirit message to attend medical school after menopause, training at the Arthur Findlay College in England to become an evidential medium, founding and operating a medical clinic center for integrative medicine, and so much more. I'm looking forward to asking Lotte about what she learned during her 2 out-of-body near-death experiences, the spirit message she received that guided her to become a physician, and how she now actively blends spirituality with Western medicine, just for starters, for what is surely going to be an interesting, empowering, and enlightening interview with a very, very special woman. And one more sidebar. Lotte has a chapter in her book called The Journey of Self-Love that talks about a woman's body image that is not to be missed. Hi, Lotte. A warm, heartfelt welcome to Grief and Rebirth podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
I am too. It's such a pleasure to meet you. I loved your book. I truly did. So let's start with this question. Please describe your childhood in Sweden as an only girl with 3 brothers in a home that was steeped in science, and the career that you chose to pursue that became what you call a bury in your life experiences.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Sweden, and I was born in 1958, so I was raised during the 60s. And my parents were actually very open-minded considering the era, and they let me be who I needed to be. So they gave me a lot of freedom to, to dress the way I wanted. I wanted to have blue jeans, just like my brothers. And I was definitely a tomboy as a child. I loved riding my bicycle and run in the woods and, and just play. I played more with boys as a child because I was very active and loved to run and bike. And then, going to school and being raised in that environment, I was really good in the science classes, and the school said, oh, you should, be majoring in the science classes in high school. And in Sweden, we major in high school. And then from high school, we go straight to medical school or nursing school. So we don't do the 4 years of college like we do here in the United States. And they said, oh, you should be a doctor. Your brother that's 5 years older than you, he is going down that line and you should do the same. And I looked at how many girls or young women were in the science classes and compared to the other majors. And there were maybe 3 or 4 young women. And I looked at that and, being 14 years old back then, I figured I would never have any friends. And it was just more important to have boyfriends and be part of the social groups at school. And that's what I worried more about, back then, which is just very funny to me now because I truly did not follow my heart. It was on my mind.
But no one else also pointed out to you all those boys in medical school you were going to meet one day. Talking about meet a boy.
And it's so funny because, I was always around doctors. All my parents' friends were physicians. A lot of the physicians back then married the nurse. So a lot of my parents' friends, their wife was a nurse. Right. My mom got pregnant, it was during World War II, and she was pregnant She gave birth to my first brother when she was 19. My father was in medical school and he was 25.
Now, was your mother a nurse?
No. And so she was the only girl in her high school class. And that was back, early 1940s during the World War II. So she dropped out during that time and then gave birth. And, then she had another son. So those were my two first brothers. But back then, so she was the only girl in her whole class. Wow. And so later I was the fourth child. So when I was 10 or 11, she went back to school, completed her high school, and then got an education as a hospital floor administrator. So when I was 12, my mom worked part-time. So she was at home when I left her school and she was home when I got back home. So it was a perfect scenario for me as a child. So my father was a physician. My mom ended up, doing that, but I was always surrounded by science and by medicine. And as long as I can remember, I wanted to be a doctor. And I played doctor as a child. I had the stethoscope, did all those things. And then I was 14 and I looked at that science major and I said, can't do it. So I majored in languages and business in high school. And then I married an American, and moved to the United States when I was 21.
But those experiences, you had your first jobs and all, ended up being very handy for you later on.
Right. So then I majored again. So then, my husband had a year left at Boston University. I worked as a secretary for the biomedical engineering department at Boston University that year. And then we were supposed to go back to Sweden because I had started studying in Sweden at the University of Stockholm. But then the professors in the engineering school, they convinced me that I should go to Boston University, and they wanted me to become an engineer in computer science.
Well, you're great.
Oh, that logical mind, it is so strong. So now you later on, you're going to understand why I had a hard time, moving into the spiritual realms of existence. And because I came from that very hardcore science, my dad didn't really believe in anything of that afterlife. And he grew up going to Sunday school since he was 3 years old. So he knew the Bible backwards and forwards. And he was on the board at the church. I was confirmed at age 14, but he never really encouraged us to go to church. And he said, that's something you have to decide for yourself. And he never went to church. He was never regular. He already knew everything. So coming from that, but he really didn't believe that the spirit would survive death. So that was just something that to him did not exist, or just wasn't possible.
Boy, has he learned a lot since
yes
from you recently. So I know that you have had some very dramatic near-death and out-of-body experiences. So would you please share your experience giving birth to your daughter during an earthquake, no less, which led to your first out-of-body near-death experience, and the sensation that your soul had not fully returned to your body? And what was your takeaway from this experience on the other side? Albeit brief that this one was.
Yeah. So I gave birth to my daughter, and I was in the labor at the hospital, and I was contracting, 2 or 3 minutes apart. And the first earthquake hit, which was 7.4. And that's one of the times in my life when I thought I was going to die. And many times people have been in accidents or airplanes, and your life flashes before your eyes and you're thinking, oh my gosh, this is it, right? I'm going to die. And so that was one of those moments. And there were floor to ceiling windows in the labor room, and everything was just rattling, all those instruments on the metal trays, just jumping up and down. And people, the midwives, the nurses, my husband, everybody was leaning over me on the birthing table to hold on. They would have fallen down. They were holding on and holding me down so I wouldn't levitate off. That's how much it shook.
In the middle of your contractions.
Yeah. And I'm in the middle of, 2 to 3 minutes apart. And I honestly thought I was going to die. We lost the power in the hospital. And I said, we're going to be buried in the rubble because the ceiling tiles are going to start falling in. The windows are going to cave in, right? That much shaking. And so my labor actually stopped. So that's how bad it shook. And, the generators kicked on in the hospital. We had the light equivalent to a night light. And then half an hour went by and I gave birth. And then we had a 7.2 earthquake following that. which was, but now we said, okay, it's either going to be bigger or smaller, but we could tell it was slightly less. The magnitude of each level is, like 10 times. 7.2 to 7.4 is a big difference, though anything over 7 is a huge earthquake. The reason we didn't have so much destruction was because the epicenter of that earthquake was in the desert. But I gave birth in the eastern part of Anaheim, which is in Southern California. Anybody who's been to Disneyland knows where Anaheim is. And so we were really close to the epicenter, being in eastern part of Anaheim. And the hospital I was in was built on rollers. So the whole hospital was just swaying back and forth to withstand that earthquake. And maybe if it hadn't been built on rollers, it would have collapsed. So maybe that is what ultimately saved our life. And then I hemorrhaged the first time. So finally, I get to hold the baby after these earthquakes and all this trauma happening and my labor stopping and starting. And as soon as they give me the baby, I just arch backwards and I just yell out and I say, take the baby, take the baby. And I was just having these excruciating pains. And then there was, this mountain of blood clots coming out, and the midwives working on me and putting me on Pitocin IV drip to contract the uterus. And we still, of course, had no electricity. So this is all happening with, with a night light.
So frightened. Oh my God.
And so then I stayed an extra day in the hospital and they sent me home. And then 10 days later, I started hemorrhaging and there were blood clots the size of a baby's head. So I go back to the ER and I tell them what happened. They keep me for observation. They say, well, nothing much is going on right now. So we're going to send you back home. It could have been a second lining. And this is 1992. So, no ultrasound, no blood work, nothing. So they send me home and then I hemorrhage again the next evening, which was a Thursday evening. We call the hospital and it's late at night. It's probably like 9:30 at night. So my husband's on the phone. My parents are visiting from Sweden to help with the kids. And I yell to my husband, I said, the bleeding stopped. I'm not going back. They're not going to do anything. So they decide I should see the doctor in Huntington Beach the next morning, because that's where we were living at the time. It's in Southern California. So the next morning I see the doctor. He does the same thing. He did a manual inspection. Well, not much bleeding is going on right now. And now I've hemorrhaged twice already. So he sends me on my way. And then later that day, because now it's Friday, so it's probably around 4 or 5 in the afternoon, I hemorrhage again, another huge blood clot. So we look at each other, we say, okay, we're going to have to go back. This is the third time now. I mean, it's a lot of blood. So we go back to the ER and they keep me for observation. They come in, they do a manual observation. They say, well, not much bleeding is going on right now. Could have been, another second lining coming out. They leave me in the room, close the door and walk away. And then I'm lying there. And then finally,
Who's watching your baby through all this? Who's watching your baby?
So we brought the baby. So my dad and my husband is in the waiting room with the baby that is now about 12 days old.
And she wants to drink some milk, I'm sure.
Right. Because we thought, well, they're just going to give me some medication or, do something and then fix me and send me on my way. So we brought the baby and we didn't have any bottles or, formula or anything. And my mom was home with my 6-year-old and 3-year-old, my 2 boys. And so here I am and I start bleeding again. And as I'm starting to bleed, the only thing that's going through my mind is, finally, I'm starting to bleed. They're going to figure out something is wrong with me. So I'm just, bleeding. I'm lying in like a pool of blood on this table. And the spirit world, I'm sure, sent this nurse to check on me. So she opens the door and her jaw just drops. And she's like, oh, as she sees all the blood. And I can hear the call on the loudspeaker, OBGYN, stat to the ER, OBGYN, stat to the ER. And all I'm still thinking is, wow, they finally figured out something is wrong with me. So here comes this, middle-aged gentleman jogging into the room, and I'm 34, looking like the picture of health because I'm healthy. We live in Southern California. I'm tan. It's in the middle of the summer, right? So I don't look sick. So very deceiving when you're a medical doctor, right? People often look well, but you can't tell what's going on inside by looking at the surface until it's too late sometimes, right? So he comes in, he does another manual inspection. He's got his probably resident physician in tow, this younger doctor. And as they're doing the manual inspection, another huge blood clot comes out, the size of a baby's head. So now he really understood what was going on. And he had already asked me, he said, how much have you been bleeding? And I said, well, Wednesday, hemorrhage Thursday, hemorrhaged again earlier today, and I'm hemorrhaged again. So this was the fifth time in total that I was hemorrhaging. And so at this point, I try to sit up and tell him, I don't feel too good. And he knew it because he knew how much I had been bleeding. He knew exactly what was going on. So he just pushed me back on the table, tilted it backwards. My head is going down, my feet are going up, and I can hear the room filling with people. And as they're trying to place the IV, so they hadn't even placed an IV yet. Now you get an IV many times just going to the ER because they want to make sure they have access to your veins if you go into shock or start collapsing. Because once you go into shock, your veins collapse. And it's very difficult to get access to the vein with a needle because the veins are kind of shrinking down. So they had a really hard time placing the IV. So I got the nurse on my left trying to place the IV. I got the nurse on my right quoting my blood pressure. And, I'm lying on the table thinking, what's taking them so long? And I have this feeling of having jumped out of an airplane and it's just free fall to the ground. I'm just flying through the air. And as the nurse on my right yells out my blood pressure and she says, 50/15, hurry. And it was shortly after that I knew that I was dying, which was very different from the experience I had when giving birth, when I thought I was going to die. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. I'm going to die. We're never going to make it. Oh, my poor boys, they're going to grow up without a mom and dad. We're going to be buried in this rubble. This was very different because I knew I was dying. So here I am on this table, feeling like have fallen out of an airplane. I'm just free falling. And I know I'm dying and I can feel my soul is trying to leave. And I'm holding on.
What did that feel like? You felt your soul was trying to leave from what location? From where in your body?
Just
from
like moving out. I had the feeling of there was something that was separating from my physical body. So there was a separation that was happening. And so to me on the table, I'm holding on. I'm just kind of, how do you describe this? Holding on, sucking on to that soul. You can't leave or stay in the body. You're holding on.
Your personality's holding on, but your soul is saying, hey, I'm out of here.
And you're just kind of like holding on. You can feel that separation. And I was a complete atheist, so I didn't believe in any of this, right? So here I am. And the separation of your soul happens so quickly. But I'm lying on this table and I can feel this separation taking place. What do? The atheist that I was, I prayed to God to save my life because there's nothing left, right? There is nothing left. There is your only hope that something is out there that is going to try to help you. And within a split second, and that happens so quickly, you're inside your body, but then the next second I'm outside. But as soon as I'm outside my body, the first thing that occurs to me is, wait, how can this be? How can I be outside my body and still be me? So, for somebody who's a complete atheist and scientist, this really turns your perception of who you are upside down, right? So here I am, but there's a knowing that I can access all time. There is no time in that the realm. So you can access past, present, and future all at the same time because there is no time. But there is also this feeling of unconditional love, the peace, and that there is something greater, and knowing that I belong to my body down there, just like I belong to the house I live in. I belong to the car I drive. Not really belong, but that's your car. That's your house. That's where you live. And that was the feeling being outside of my body, was that I live down there in that body. That's my home here on earth. And then I just step out and I'm still me. I'm still the same person. I'm still the same soul. Everything about me was still the same, except there was no time and this unconditional love. And with that, I got, sucked back into my body.
They were saving you. They were working. They were frantic down there.
They really were. So I know we're going to talk about my second NDE, which is very different, but I'll kind of joke about how I had to have a second NDE because the first, I didn't get the full effect. They were too efficient. They showed me too quickly. So I didn't get the message. I didn't get the whole message.
So let's talk about your second ND. That was, if we didn't have enough drama with number one, let's go for number two. So you'd been an atheist. You didn't believe in life after death. And now you have a second near-death experience, which really transformed your perceptions about the afterlife and spirituality. So let it rip. Lotte, tell us what happened with that one.
Yeah, so we can go into that, all the after effects that happen. We're going to talk about that too, and electricity interference and clairvoyance and all these things that started to come through. But then what happened in a nutshell is that I got really sick after this. So it took me 6 months of, I barely have any memories for the first 3 months because my parents changed their ticket back to Europe twice. And then my mother-in-law came from Florida and to help with the kids. And my daughter was born at the end of June. And my memories kind of start in September. So I'm told that I just slept that whole time. I didn't have any blood. The first thing that physician said in the ER, he said, I have to give you blood because you've lost so much blood. And I look at him and I say, if you don't have to give me blood, don't give me blood. Because this was 1992 and it was when the AIDS epidemic started. They had no way of checking the blood for AIDS. And a lot of people that received blood transfusions back then ended, 6 years later, now they have AIDS. So he said, we'll see what we can do. You're not going to feel too good, but we'll see how quickly you make blood. Otherwise, you're a healthy young person. So I stayed in the hospital for 2 days and they said, you're making blood quickly, but you're not going to feel too good. So then it took like 3 months before I could even sit up. And then it took another 3 months. It was about a week before Christmas that I finally left the house with 3 children. I went to the store to get a gallon of milk and ice cream for the kids with 3 kids in tow. And that I totally wiped me out. So, I needed to rest the whole day.
Oh my gosh.
So then we all got sick and we all got the flu and we had to go to a walk-in clinic because my husband was, his company got bought and we were on the wait to get insurance. So this whole year, when I'm the sickest I've ever been in my whole life, we have no medical insurance because we couldn't afford paying COBRA. We were in our early 30s and we had 3 kids, a big family. The COBRA was, back then in 1992, $600 or $700. I mean, that was almost like your rent. So we said, let's just wait 3 months and, I'll be fine. I'm healing. So anyway, so this goes on.
You have an amazing disposition. Other people would be screaming and going crazy. I mean, it was like your acceptance was of what was going on was very impressive.
So we all get pneumonia. We go to a walk-in clinic. Everybody gets antibiotics. Everybody gets better except for me. And after 8 days on antibiotics, I go back and these physicians said, why are you back? You're even sicker now than you were 8 days ago. So they do they draw some blood and they come back in the room and they look at me and they say, do you have leukemia or AIDS? Because you have no immune system.
Oh my God.
And I told them, I said, well, the good news is I did not get a blood transfusion, so it wouldn't be AIDS. And they said, you have no immune system. That's why you're so sick. And they said, you had to go to the ER because you literally can die because you have, everything is so low, all your blood values. And I said, well, we don't have any medical insurance. So if I do that, I can't pay the bill. And then I'm going to have a pre-existing condition when we get our medical insurance. So anyway, I managed to get better. They called me the next day and said, if you're not better, you have to go to the ER. I don't care if you have insurance or not. And I said, I'm getting better. So it was just inching, my way back to health.
Wow.
And a couple of months went by and I started bruising. So something that I bumped into the baby's changing table and something that would give you a bruise like the size of a nickel or a dime, gave me a bruise that spanned my entire hip area. It was just purple and red. And then I got pneumonia again. And now it's May in Huntington Beach. So, I don't have an immune system and I have low platelets because I'm bruising just by the touch. And so the doctor said,
must have been a delight for your family. Oh my goodness.
You have to go to the ER. You have to go to the ER right now.
Wow.
You have to run lab work. And I said, I am a month and a half away from getting medical insurance. We were going to get insurance July 1st. And this was, around May 15th. So he gave me all the lab work like a good physician that he was. And I basically just ripped him up. And now thinking back, now that I know about it, having gone through medical school myself, I'm just like, thank you, spirit world, for keeping me alive, because that was apparently my journey. But, if that was a serious condition that I had. So what I know now and what my physician told me before I went to medical school is most likely what I had is something called aplastic anemia. And that is a suppression of the bone marrow. So you're not making enough white blood cells, enough red blood cells, or enough platelets. So that's why you have the bruising, you have poor immune system, and you're exhausted because you don't have enough red blood cells to carry your oxygen. So that's what I ended up having. And so that took like a good 6 years to come out of that, because I didn't get medical treatment for it, even though later we got insurance. But then now I'm 2 or 3 years out,
Wow,
and I can
Lotte.
see I'm healing.
I tip my hat to you. Wow.
It was a journey. So I can't even stand up to make food for my kids. I have a stool in the kitchen. I have to sit by the stove in order to make pancakes for the kids, because I will literally pass out if I stand up that long. If I put my knee on the floor to tie my children's shoes, because my daughter was only 2, I would get a bruise that covered my entire knee, my whole kneecap, just by the touch of the knee on the floor. So that means that you have very few platelets, right? So anyway, so I'm in this healing journey, and I have this feeling ever since I had that first near-death experience that my soul had not merged back. So I always call it the merging problem.
Even though you were such a disbeliever, an unbeliever, you knew that something was, wow.
Right. And it was my mother-in-law that said, this weird thing happened. And I had this feeling of leaving my body. And she said, you had what's called a near-death experience. And she brought me the book by Raymond Moody, Life After Life. And that was my introduction. So I had started to understand what had happened, because I thought I was going crazy. Maybe it is some kind of hallucination of the brain that happens, because I was in so scientific, right? Trying to make sense out of it scientifically. So here I am in this healing journey, and I'm sick, and I'm struggling to keep my soul inside. So part of that, I feel like it's a merging problem. The soul did not merge all the way back. And part of it might have been that I was so sick that I always felt like I was going to pass out. But that feeling, it's not just the feeling I'm dizzy, I'm going to pass out. It was a feeling of the soul keeping to wanting to leave. So I would, wake up in the middle of the night. My head would be pounding because not enough blood in my head. And I would take my head off the pillow, pull my legs up. This was just my normal existence of this healing journey. Well, about 2 years, into this healing journey, the same thing happens. I wake up, my head is pounding. I put my head on the sheet or on the mattress, pull my legs up, trying to get my blood back. But the same thing as in the ER, 1 second you're inside, the next second you're outside. And so it's just you just get pulled out, and this is why I say they didn't get the full effect the first time. So I had to have a second experience. And for a long time, it really bothered me, this experience, because was it a near-death experience because I was sick? I couldn't prove it. I wasn't in the ER struggling for my life. I didn't have a whole team of medical professionals trying to save me. Or was it a spiritually transformative experience? And I struggled with that for years because I'm so scientific. How do you explain this phenomenon, right? And now, so finally I came to terms with that after many, many years. And it's not the experience itself. It is what happens to the soul, what happens to you as a human being. How do you change from the experience that you had? But we get fascinated.
We transform. Yes, we do.
Right? We get fascinated hearing about the experience too. So I get pulled out of my body, and this is very different.
So now you're in bed. It's at night. Your husband's
yes, it's in the middle of the night,
and your soul's going for a trip.
Yep, I'm just like, this is it. We're leaving. So I just get pulled out of my body, but this time I just have this feeling of tumbling through space, tumbling through darkness, and I get to this place that I call the mid station, because it's this feeling that there are floors above me and there are floors below me. Like you go into a skyscraper, you push the 50th floor and a skyscraper with 100 floors, and you get off on the 50th floor. There are floors above you and below you. even though you're not on those floors. It was that feeling. So I get to this, so I call it the mid station. I also call it the bouncing station because they sent me back. So I get there and I hear the most beautiful music that you can imagine. It's not of this earth plane. It is more beautiful than you can imagine. And I look around I don't have a body. I just have like a soul. And I see a log cabin. And I just think it's funny what we see. And because I see log cabins. So I look inside and I say, maybe the music is coming from this. So I look inside, it's empty. So then I look to the left, there is the exact same log cabin that's on the right, just a mirror image. And I look inside, but it's empty. But then I become aware of this growing light behind me. So it's almost like standing in a spotlight at like a car dealership. That is just the spotlight, this bright white light that's just growing behind me. And so I turn around and I become enveloped in this white light. But in this white light, there is an outline of angels. And the music is coming from the angels.
Oh my God. And what do they look like to you at that moment?
It was an outline. So it was just these very, very large outlines of like angels. You could see the wings. I knew it was angels, but I couldn't, they don't have facial features. It was just an outline in the white light. So there's a white outline of angels in the white light. But I don't believe in angels. I'm still struggling with putting my first near-death experience right into perspective.
This is like surprise.
Right, surprise. Here we go. So, but there is this knowing this white light is the source. It is what we come from. Wow. We carry this light within us. We come from this white light. We return to this loving white light when we leave this earth plane. And as I'm standing in this light and listening to this most beautiful music, there's two spirit guides that are, one is to my right and one is diagonally to the left in front of me. And the one on my right communicates with the other spirit guide. And he says, "What is she doing here? She can't be here." And I'm like, wait a second. How can this be? How can I be outside my body and still be me? Because this is the second time now. Why, why is this keep happening?
And they're talking about me over here. What is this?
Right. You're right. And so the spirit guide on my left says, well, if I told you, you wouldn't remember, but you will remember this. And then it's just like images just sort of appear. It's almost like you're in a movie theater and then they turn the movie on. It's all black and all of a sudden the screen is there. But it is as if I'm standing on the moon and looking down on Earth. But around the earth, there is what I called at the time, because it's 1994, the silvery, glittery fishnet, because it's this diamond-shaped net. But back then, we didn't have Google. We didn't have internet search engines. So there was no way of looking any of this kind of information up, or I had never come across any information like this. So I see this silvery, glittery fishnet, and he says, everything on earth is connected to each other. And everything on earth is connected up to this fishnet. And I called it the fishnet because growing up in Sweden, we spent the summers in the archipelago, which is, over 25,000 islands. And I would row the boat for my grandmother as she laid nets in the ocean. And when she pulled those nets up early in the morning, those water droplets on that fishnet would sort of glitter and shimmer in the sunlight. So to me, it looked like a fishnet around the earth.
Or someone else might say you were looking at the original web.
Right.
that connects us all. That's amazing.
So, and with that, I got sent back. But that is what really activated my life path. It is all about that.
Wow. And you also had psychic abilities heightened, right? So suddenly for someone who didn't believe in anything, what were you able to do now?
Yeah. So then there was this, constant progression that started after my first NDE. It started the next day in the hospital. I'm lying in the hospital bed after my first NDE, and I'm petrified of what had happened. I'm scared to death of the fact that I had left my body. Right. I figured if I tell anyone, they're going to lock me up in the mental ward. So I didn't dare telling anyone. And in the corner, the left corner of my ceiling, I can hear my sister-in-law, who had passed away about 10 days earlier of lung cancer. And she was in her 40s. And I can hear her say, everything is going to be okay. So now I was outside my body the day before, and now I think I can hear my sister-in-law. I mean, it was actually quite scary I didn't understand what was going on, but that just opened up the channel that for me later to become a medium and work with the spirit world. But it started that next day. Yeah.
Wow.
But then there are many stories, I could tell stories too.
But so this one was an initial clairaudience.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess eventually others like clairvoyance and clairsentience started to kick in. So it sounds like you always had clairsentience and you didn't really know it.
I think it was always there. So, studying at Arthur Findlay College and studying with famous shamans, they tell me it's like it was always there. I just didn't know. And it was always suppressed. And so that's why I feel that the near-death experiences really activated my life path. So I started, seeing things before they would happen. Saw the scratch on the van door. We were going to be in an accident.
Oh my gosh, that's an amazing story. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I woke up. So my kids are now maybe around 10. My younger ones are around 10 or 12. So it's been about 10 years of this. And, the constant hearing the spirit world, or being shown images of what's going to happen, or knowing things about people before I'm told that. And I would start writing things down, because in the beginning I thought it's just a deja vu. It's just, it's a coincidence. It can't be. And so now it's been 10 years of this. So now I'm starting to get it. I'm a slow learner that way. I need a lot of confirmations that this is really what's going on. Are you going to accept it sometime soon? So, it goes on forever for many, many years. Now it's 10 years into it. I wake up one morning and I get 3 images. The first image is I see a black scratch on the van door of our car. And then the second image, I see 2 of my kids in the car, my son that's about 12 in the front seat, my daughter's in the back seat. And the third image, I'm leaving a note on the windshield of a black sedan car.
Wow.
So I tell my kids about this vision that I had. I said, you guys are in the car. We're going to be in an accident. I don't know where it is. So I was driving my kids to San Francisco every day, because they were at the San Francisco Ballet School and they trained 6 days a week. And so every day we'd take, the Bay Bridge from, East Bay into the city. And we figured out that there was this one intersection. When you get off the bridge, you go down to the surface streets and you get to the light. And when you turn left at that light, you have oncoming traffic. So me turning left would expose the right side of my car for a possible accident. So we figured that is the only time that the right-hand side of the car is exposed. So every day we drive to the city, my kids' noses up against the windshield, like looking, Mom, the coast is clear. Because they're nervous too. Like, we're going to be.
You're still a skeptic, but they believe.
Right, exactly. They know Mom's not wrong.
Right.
So we do this for 10 days. And I kept saying, why am I leaving a note on the windshield? Where is the driver of that car? But there was no other images saying, police cars or ambulances. But, why would I leave the note? So then we're in Walnut Creek. We're coming out of the bookstore in East Bay, San Francisco. And it's a really crowded parking lot. There's a big truck in the way that's offloading all these boxes. And I'm trying to make a right-hand turn onto the little tiny surface street. And as I'm making a right turn, the right-hand side of my car scrapes the black sedan car that's parked right at the end of that driveway.
How did they know?
At this point, I stopped the car. I got out. I walked around the car. I looked at the scratch. And I just started laughing. I just looked up at the sky and I just laughed. And I know all these people were just looking at me. They must have thought I was a complete nutcase. Here's this woman laughing. And then, of course, I left the note on the black sedan car on the windshield. And the kids were so relieved. It's like, finally, it's over.
Because you thought it could have been so much worse. That's amazing. What a story. I guess that is called claircognizance, I guess, because you had that knowing in advance. Right.
So it's like so a lot of the information comes clairvoyantly to me. So I see images. And even when I work with the spirit world, I see images. They're showing me images typically of what's going on. Sometimes I'll feel it. Clairsentient, I'll feel the issue in their body if I there are times when I've had people passing away from breast cancer. I'll feel it. I feel the tension in my breast. So I say, I believe that your spouse passed away from breast cancer. Is that correct? And so sometimes I feel it, and sometimes I hear it. But I'd say probably 80 or 90% of the information I get is clairvoyant. So I see images.
Yeah, that's so cool. Now you got messages that you were to go to med school.
Mm-hmm.
You would combine Eastern and Western modalities and write 3 books. So tell us about that and your reaction to this information, and how did this information come to you?
So it was 2004, and I was in my living room, and I was thinking I should start thinking about going back to the workforce. And I've been home all these years, and I had, called my friend and said, I finally healed. It's finally, it's 12 years later. It was like
Right.
all of a sudden, that's it. I'm healed. I'm ready to take on the world. And so I was on the internet. I was looking for different things, and I found this amazing school, and it said Naturopathic Medicine. And you study not just Western medicine and pharmaceuticals and all the traditional Western medical treatments, but you also study homeopathy, acupuncture, nutrition, herbal medicines, botanical medicine. And then I realized it was a real medical school. And so I was hoping to find something I could study online. I was still, taking my kids, picking them up from the subway system. They were taking BART into the city, San Francisco, because my daughter still was not 16 yet. So she didn't have a license yet. So they were still, somewhat dependent on me. So I was hoping to find something like that. So then I just closed the computer. I walked away, walked to the kitchen. I said, well, I'll just look again tomorrow. I can't go to med school. I'm in my 40s now, and that's a lot of work. I got to do all the prereq classes and chemistry, physics, and all that. And then even if I did that, who's going to accept somebody that's in her late 40s to med school? So I walked to my kitchen, and as I'm walking to the kitchen, I become aware of a spirit guide coming in.
Wow.
And at that time, I didn't often, see the spirit world. It was more just hearing them in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And he gave me 3 messages, and he said, you have to go to medical school and become a physician. And you have to combine East and West, which what I looked at is kind of the perfect combination. Naturopathic medicine is a combination of East and Western medicine, and also old and new ways of looking at things and healing. And he said, you are to bring messages to people, messages of healing to people. And I was like, what messages? What does that mean?
Now, who's telling you all of this? How is
the spirit?
It's like a thought. It's coming in as a thought of what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. It's that connection. Somebody is giving you the information. It's not coming from your mind. It's coming from somewhere.
Which is what happened to me too. It's like sort of
it's not yours. Yeah, and you're completely aware that it's not your thought. It's coming. Somebody's telling you this, but you can't see them. And I had to combine East and West, and I had to bring messages to people. And I had to be a naturopathic doctor, and I had to write 2 books. No, wait, 3. And that 2, no, wait, 3. I have received that message from 2 mediums in the United States that didn't know anything about me, and 2 of my teachers at Arthur Findlay College that also did not know anything about these previous messages. But it's always the same message. I have your mother with me, and she says, you are to write 2 books. No, wait, 3. And the message is exactly the same, like the original message I got every single time.
You're giving you validation each time.
Yeah. Oh, I see. I told you I'm a slow learner. I need a lot of confirmation.
A lot of reinforcement. So you ended up going to medical school 54 years old, which is amazing. And so what was that like for you? And what influenced you to go to the Arthur Findlay College to develop a gift for mediumship? It's not everyone who becomes a medical doctor and a medium.
Right. So the med school, first of all, it's never too late to transform your life. That's what I want to say to all the listeners out there that are thinking that, I'm too old for this. You're not too old. There are so many benefits from being that older student. First of all, I needed a lot less sleep because I was 54. If I had done this journey when I was in my late 20s, I don't know if I would have made it, because I just required more sleep then. I also didn't have all my life experiences to draw on while I was learning the new material. And, whether you are in your 20s or 30s or you're 54, I think everybody goes through the same shock because everybody's struggling that first semester to pick up the pace, because it's not the material that is hard, it's the pace that you have to learn the material that's hard. Those 200 PowerPoint slides every morning, the lecture from 8 to 12, the whole first 2 years is always that 4-hour lecture. And then you got classes in the afternoon and sometimes until 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And then when are you supposed to review the 200 slides that was
And
part of
eat-
the main lecture?
And eat and sleep. And all
Right.
the
And eat and
things.
sleep. And then, after a week, now it's 1,000 PowerPoint slides. And then the teacher says, we're going to have a quiz with 10 questions. And you're thinking, out of 1,000 PowerPoint slides? Yeah. So that's the information. It's just a tremendous amount of information. And that's what's hard. That's what's hard to get used to in the beginning. It's that you hear something once, you have to retain it. And in the beginning, I think, your brain cells double that first semester. So anybody who is thinking of making a career change, just, baby steps in the right, and once you make the steps to change, everything will start to fall into place. But then the Arthur Findlay, that came afterward. And that was as soon as I graduated. I graduated.
It must have been amazing when you graduated. It must have been such a cause for celebration for everyone, right?
Yeah.
So now you've graduated, you're ready to go to med school, and all of a sudden, whoops, we got another detour coming up.
Yeah. So I graduated in June of 2016. And then we take, there's 2 boards you take in med school. You take the science boards after the first 2 years, and then you take the clinical boards after your second 2 years. So we graduate in June, and then you got about, 6 weeks or so to review all the material from the past 2 years, all those thousands of PowerPoint slides. You have 6 weeks to go through all of that. And then you're taking the boards, which literally took 2 or 3 days of testing, taking the boards. And then it takes, so that was in early August, and then it takes until the first week of October until you get the results if you passed your boards. So you're just kind of working under, in a clinic and helping out with things that you can help out with while you're waiting for that license to come through. And as I'm doing this, I started studying craniosacral therapy, because I said, well, I got to do something. So I could use this time while I'm waiting for my license to learn this whole other modality. So I meet this woman. I go to San Francisco. I'm working here in Phoenix. I go to San Francisco for this seminar, and I meet this woman who says, I just moved to Phoenix, to Scottsdale. And we never got to work with each other at the seminar. So I said, well, I'm going to be in your area in like 2 weeks for a seminar. So let's have dinner. So I met her for dinner, and she said, well, I'm a medium, and I trained at Arthur Findlay College. And I have somebody with me from the spirit world that would like to give you a message. Are you open to receive messages? So here I am. And this is in 2016, even though I have gone through all this. I went to medical school based on the information from the spirit world. I am still a skeptic, because I am so scientific. And if you can't prove it, probably isn't true, right? So I'm kind of laughing at inside saying, there is no way this woman is going to know anything about me or my life. There is no way. So I'm just kind of like laughing and saying, sure, I'm open for messages. And then, of course, it became very apparent that it was my mother. And she started telling me about how I rowed the boat for my grandmother and laying nets in the ocean and all these things that it would have been impossible to even guess, right? Very accurate information. And then she says, your mother says you have to go to Arthur Findlay College. And I start laughing, and I said, I can't go to Arthur Findlay College. I just graduated. I'm waiting for my license. In 2 or 3 weeks, I'm going to find out if I even pass the boards. I got to make money. I'm in a residency now. I can't just go to Arthur Findlay College. And she keeps telling me, your mom keeps telling me, you have to go to Arthur Findlay College. So after the 3rd time or 4th time, I finally said, okay, fine. I will make it happen. I will go to Arthur Findlay College, because it was just one evidential thing after another. And she was talking about.
You're in California, right? And Arthur Findlay College, you're in
Arizona
at the time. And Arthur Findlay College is in England.
Yes.
So now they're telling you from Sweden to California to Arizona. And now they're saying, go take a little trip to England to complete your education. But it's quite a different education.
So, of course, 6 months later, here I am, England, Arthur Findlay College, my first trip. And then the rest is history. And
How long were you at the Arthur Findlay College, Lotte?
so I was there a week at a time. So I've been there 5 or 6 times now.
So you would go for a week, then go home, and then you would come back and take different classes.
Mhm.
So that leads me to ask you to please tell us about medical mediumship, because you combined your two experiences to become the unique force that you are. So
yes, and it's very
that.
interesting. And I would get my teachers would tell me that at Arthur Findlay College that you're probably going to get the medical reason many times why they passed away. But then I did that in the beginning, and I would know exactly what they passed away from. And I think that's how it started. It's because, again, I needed a lot of assurance that I was doing the right thing and confirmation on my work. And so that's how it started. They came through and they would tell me how they passed. But then what happened later is I would start getting messages, like a patient would walk in, a new patient, I would know absolutely nothing about them. And the spirit world would say, they have this condition. And I would say, what do you mean they have this condition? Right? So, I mean, there's some incredible stories of people that you would have thought that there was nothing wrong with them, and then they ended up having cancer. And it was only because the spirit world said, you have to do an x-ray, you have to do this. Most of the time that that would have been dismissed as, that's just allergies. Person is not even coughing. I'm listening to the lungs. I can't even hear anything. And still the x-ray showed that there was spots in the lungs.
How wonderful it would have been for you if you had done the examination on you in the days, because you would have been told, no, she looks like she's not bleeding, but trust us, she's not. So you were also told to write a book, right? And about the journey of your soul, no less. And with its focus on how we can change our lives, especially the parts of our lives we do not like. And so would you like to share a few of the important lessons and messages that you impart to your readers in your enlightening book, Med School After Menopause, The Journey of My Soul, which I have to say I really enjoyed. I really could not put it down. It's fascinating, Lotte, really great.
Oh,
so
thank you.
Tell us about your book, and and share a few of the important things you'd like people to glean. But, without them we want them to read the book. So,
Right. You're right. So I wrote the book. So again, the spirit world told me I had to write the book, right? That's one of the messages, was that I had to write 2 books, no wait, 3. And originally, I said, what do you mean writing a book? I'm not an author. What am I supposed to write about? And the spirit world just kept telling me, when the time is right, we will tell you. And there were times when I thought I had lost my mind, because the message would just be, oh, the time is right, we're going to tell you. And then all of a sudden, there it is. And they said, no, the book's going to be called Med School After Menopause, because it's to inspire other people to transform their life. It's never too late to change. But it's also a subtitle of The Journey of My Soul. So it is to show other people we all have a journey in this lifetime, the journey of everybody's soul, right? We all are on our unique journeys. But how can we make the best of that? So the book is really about, it is my own journey. So I share a lot of stories from my life, and how my perception of who we are and how we fit into this world changed from my near-death experiences, and how I started tuning in to mediumship and psychic abilities. What does that look like? How can we all become more psychic and intuitive? Because everybody is the psychic and an intuitive, because we are spiritual human beings. We are creatures that live here in the earth plane, having a spiritual experience. But we are often, not developing these talents that we all have. And of course, some people are going to have more talents. Everybody's not going to be a working medium, but everybody has an ability, I think, to connect with the spirit world for their own benefit and for their own healing and for their own journey. So I wrote the book to help other people develop that intuitive and psychic ability, and also to change the way they perceive the world, so that they would have a better understanding of who they are and how they fit into this world, because we all see the world from our own, so to speak, rose-colored glasses, right? That's how we came in, is the experience that we had during childhood and how we were trained, and our DNA and our ancestral lineage. That's all combined to how we see the world.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to take people through that journey in my book, and there's little messages at the end of each book, each
Oh,
chapter.
I love
that
that.
will,
I absolutely love that. I went for every
Yeah.
single one of those messages. And my favorite chapter that I mentioned before is your chapter about a woman's body image.
Mhm.
I don't know a woman, there's no woman I know that doesn't have a problem with her body image. So you call that the journey of self-love. So please share with us what you share in your book about accepting the body we've been given and not being judgmental, not only of other people's bodies, but our own bodies.
Yeah. And I think that's the hardest, is the self-love for people. And I often have people do affirmations. I say, go stand in front of your mirror and tell yourself that you are perfect. I love myself. You are gorgeous. You are perfect just the way you are.
And what do you
Right?
say if they say to you, that's not true? I have this, I
Right?
have that, I have this, I have that.
Right. And it's very difficult for some people if they're not
Yes.
used to doing that. It's actually a learning curve involved in being able to be kind to yourself. And that's something that we pick up early on. And it's part of that is, ancestral and how we view ourselves, because it starts early in childhood when you're just in the crib. That subconscious mind and those tapes that keep playing in your head as you go through life.
So what you're saying is that a lot of our self-criticism comes from our ancestral, what's been passed down to us, or those perceptions, and we really have to change the way we process and talk to ourselves.
Yeah.
And way even we talk to ourselves when we see someone else. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it repeats through the generations. So many times your own mother had the exact same problem you're experiencing. She also did not think that she was perfect and beautiful and that her body was great, and my ear was always sticking out. I talk about it in the book, on my left ear. And I used to tape it when I was, 11 or 12, because it would stick out. I would have long hair, my little ear would stick out. And I begged my dad for surgery. And my dad he was a general practitioner, and he was not fond of having any kind of elective surgery like that, because he would always tell me stories of how things would go wrong. So I heard every story, how somebody was just going to have this little, nail removed and then, died because of the infection or something. So I was very aware of that. And so he said, your ear is, perfect. My mom told me, you were made this way, you're perfect. But it took me, until my 40s or 50s to accept my ear. And I never wanted to have short hair because my ear is going to stick out. I was very aware of it. And it took me a lot of time, most of my, or at least half my life, to just heal my little ear. And then I dealt with being anorexic, in my 40s, and being that, young looking. It's kind of like the last hurrah. My kids are now older, and I'm still a young and attractive woman. And, every time I looked in the mirror, if I lose 1 more pound, I'll look even better. And it's very easy to get trapped into that, instead of saying, I'm perfect the way I am, and I don't really care what other people say or the media says. It comes from that self-love and self-acceptance. So that's where we really have to start. So
I love that. I think that's such an important chapter for everyone to read. And another thing that you talk about is ancestral healing and how it relates to our daily lives, which you just touched on. And I think you have a new release on Hemisync. Would you like to tell us about that?
Yeah. So I just produced 4 tracks with Hemisync, that you can just go to hemisync.com. And it is about
look at Dr. Lotte Valentin.
Yeah, you just look up Ancestral Healing. I'm the only one who has made Ancestral Healing on Hemisync. There's also a podcast interview of me talking about it with Hemisync. But it was just released July 20th. And there's 4 tracks to this. And it's all about healing your ancestral mother wound. And that ancestral mother wound can show up in many different ways in your life. So are you having relationship problems? Are you having panic attacks? Are you having fears of something? Are you, any kind of problem really can be related back to an ancestral mother wound. And so that ancestral mother wound is one way that we have taken on issues that our ancestors had. And it's a combination sometimes of the way we were raised, the way we saw the world when we were just in the crib, and what we learned at that early age, combined with, your mother, if she wasn't able to nurture you, she was probably also not nurtured herself. So if she wasn't nurtured herself, then how could she nurture you? She didn't know how to deal with you because she didn't have that experience as a child, and she wasn't cared for as a child. And so it's ancestral because it goes back in time. And it started out, I started working with ancestral healing when I worked as a medium, because I had 3 or 4 readings working as a medium where it would show me ancestral trauma passed down in the generation. So I would see the grandmother being physically abused, and I would see the client's mother as one of the children being physically abused by the father. And then I would see, that mother marrying the client's father, who was also physically abusive and then abused my client. And I would say, this is what I'm seeing. Is this correct? And the client would say, yes.
So I have 2 questions to this. So if you've got ancestral, and 2 questions, and let me get them both out and then you can answer them. So is there also an issue with ancestral healing on the father's line? And also, all right, so someone comes to you and they have these issues that came really from their ancestral, and you're receiving that. How do you help them to accept, to acknowledge that, and help them to heal with that?
Right. So you have to, so in these Hemisync that I released, is 4 tracks. So the first track is laying the foundation and making people aware. So I tell them just sit back and listen. Awareness, where they're having problem in their life. And then I teach them how to trace their ancestral mother wound. And then we do a shamanic journey and to bring things to the surface. And then we create healing in the last track. So, and it's similar when I work with people, it's finding out where it's coming from. So this release that I did with Hemisync is the ancestral mother wound, but there are also other ways that we inherit ancestral trauma. And we know from science that ancestral trauma is passed down on the DNA. So if your grandfather was in the world.
Really, really. So even though genetically grandpa is grandpa, but if he suffered, that goes into his DNA and then gets transferred to you when he gives birth to your father or your mother, and then you. Wow.
Yeah. So they did studies on Holocaust survivors and that survived the Holocaust, and they have now traced it down to the grandchildren. So if, for example, if the grandfather, let's say, was in the World War II, and every time the airplanes would come and they were going to drop the bombs, the sirens went off and everybody has to take cover. And every time this happened, grandpa thought, this is the day I'm going to die, right? The sirens are going off. I'm not going to make it. And he survives. But now his granddaughter, every time she hears a siren, she has a panic attack, right? But she has never had any trauma around hearing sirens herself. So it's coming from somewhere else. And then when you look at the lineage, in this case, it would be coming from the grandfather. And she is reliving that. And that was, passed down literally on the DNA. So it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating.
That is really amazing. And we're all for healing here. So everyone, I hope that you will go see Lotte and get that taken care of. So tell me, you have your Center for Integrative Medicine in Phoenix. So tell us about the services that are available there. And I know you do telemedicine appointments, and you are very busy actively blending spirituality with Western medicine. So how does that work? Someone comes in with a malady, and where do you go with all of that?
You mean the integration of the medical intuitive? Yeah. So I work as a physician in my clinic under my medical license. And then I work in my spiritual business, doing medical intuitive readings, ancestral healing.
You do all of that in your center.
Right. So the spiritual work is done all on Zoom, online. And so I do medical intuitive readings, and that came from working in a clinic setting, because I would just know what's wrong with people before they even, started talking. And that still happens. I just see somebody and the information starts coming in.
Wow.
So in the medical clinic, but it's not like you can stop it either, right? So even if I work as a doctor, I get messages, but if it's not a spiritual person, I might just say, why don't we do some lab work? Because you haven't had lab work done in a long time. Or why don't we do this ultrasound, right? Because I might be hearing a message that something is wrong. And so I guide them that way. But I'm still practicing medicine under my license, because you have to make sure everything
Of
is
course.
charted. You got to have a diagnosis code,
course.
right? It's got to be, it's a system. So working as a physician, I work a lot with women, any kind of menstrual problems, PCOS, endometriosis, anything like that, hormones, menopause. I work with bioidentical hormones. I have postgraduate education in hormones. I also have postgraduate training in mold. So I'm a mold literate certified physician, and there's not many of those.
Wow.
And
there are a lot of
exposed
things that come
to
from
mold.
mold, and they're very sneaky. I know that there's a lot of things, a lot of issues.
Oh, it's so sneaky. It's, it's when you hear the people have fallen through the cracks, it's either Lyme disease or mold exposure. And that mold exposure could have happened 10 years ago or, 20 years ago. They lived in a dorm in college that, was moldy bathrooms. And it's amazing. That mold is just sort of recirculates in your body because you have to bind it with certain things. You have to eat pharmaceuticals or a combination of nutritional supplements and herbal supplements and pharmaceuticals in order to bind those mold mycotoxins in the body and bring them out. So I do a lot of that. I do a lot of thyroid disease, food allergies, digestive issues, a lot of things that a lot of people have. I guess.
Now, do you mostly specialize in women, or you do men and children also?
I don't work with children anymore. I did after I just graduated, but now I just work with adults because I'd worked so much on
both sexes, both men and women, right? So now, my favorite thing that you say, and you've said a lot of wonderful things, is that we must heal ourselves and our problems in life to become whole. What, Lotte, does it mean to become whole, and what should people do, and why should they want to become whole? Why should they be conscious of healing their issues in this lifetime while we breathe in and out before we go to the other side?
Well, the way I look at it is I am going to resolve all my issues in this life because I don't want to repeat my issues in the next life. So whatever I don't resolve in this life, right, it's just going to come back. So I'm putting my seeds in my bag at the end of my life. Or all my sticky notes, right? So I wrote all these sticky notes before I incarnated, and I said, I'm going to have, this problem and this problem and this problem. And I put all these sticky notes on me. And then I incarnated. And every time I have a problem, I peel off that sticky note and I get rid of it. So I don't want to go to the other side at the end of my life and still have, 40 sticky notes left. I'm going to peel them all off in this life, because my next life is going to be great. I'm going to have resolved all these issues, right? And so it's the soul growth of, when you resolve your issues and you find healing for them, you're able to live your life to your fullest potential, the way you were supposed to live. But you have to take that step to create healing for yourself in order to completely open your heart, your mind, your spirit, your soul to the universe. As long as you're going through all these problems, you're just stuck in this rut, in this energetic loop, and you're just repeating things. And that's ancestral too. You just keep repeating things, right, because they have to be resolved. It's the restoration of the equilibrium of the universe itself. So you have to restore that energy to its homeostasis or equilibrium. So anything that's not healed. So ancestral healing is all the trauma that was brushed under the carpet, all the actions, the reactions and interactions of your ancestors that was just swept under the carpet. Uncle Billy that we don't talk about at Christmas dinner. Oh, he's a bad person.
Inside of you. Right?
Yeah. So, but that's going to be repeated because he did something bad. So one of the kids is definitely carrying that problem, right? But it's all those things, and we carry that, but we don't see it because we're so busy. And then we wonder, why am I in my third relationship? Why am I always attracting the wrong person? Well, because it's ancestral. You're in that loop. And so you have to create healing. And it's not until you become aware of that. And even sometimes I work with people that say, I can't, my family was like a Leave It to Beaver and everything was perfect. And then, you start talking and they realize that, oh, everything wasn't
Peel
perfect.
away a few layers. There you go.
Right.
Right.
And they have a hard time stepping into themselves. I'm having a hard time, stepping into myself. And I really want this job. And I know I'm qualified, but I never get the jobs I apply for. Breaking the bond with a mother. It goes back to that early crib phase, and it's subconscious. And you can't break out of that. You need help to untangle those ancestral wounds so that you can then live your life.
Because when you release them and you let go of them, then they don't weigh you down, and they translate themselves into all your other relationships and all your other issues.
Yeah,
oh my gosh, right? Oh my gosh. Now that everyone who's listening to this podcast would like to connect with you and your Center for Integrative Medicine in Phoenix, how can they connect with you, Dottie? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yep. So there's two websites. There is Dr. Lotte, DRLOTTE.com, and that has mostly my medical information and how I work, what kind of services I provide. And then that website is connected to my other website, which is my spiritual website. And that's called divinespiritualessence.com. And that is where people can sign up for a session with me. They can book a medical intuitive appointment, ancestral healing, mediumship or psychic readings, things like that. And that's on that website. And that's, you just go and you find a time and you just can book a session online.
Right. So I'll bet I would be willing to bet that there are times that someone has a medical intuitive reading with you, and the next thing you know, you're treating them and you're in your with your doctor hat on.
It does happen sometimes. It does happen sometimes. And sometimes it's it's a lot of times it's people, it's for anything from A to Z really, but many times people fall through the cracks of the regular Western medical system, and somehow they're guided to a medical intuitive session. And invariably, we get guided. It's divine guidance. And I will be the one person that know of that very rare condition. And I'll say, wow, do you have these symptoms? Because I'm hearing this disease. And it's very uncommon and it tends to fall through the cracks. We don't have a good way of testing for it, but this is what I think you have. And then invariably, that's what it is. And it's fascinating. And I feel like people are guided to the people that they're supposed to work with. It's that little, tap on the shoulder or the whisper in the ear that says, that person can help you, right?
Yep. It's wonderful. You're helping so many people. So what is the Lotte tip for finding joy in life?
The Lotte tip for finding joy in life is to not worry so much about anybody else, but just, that self-love, knowing that you are unique and special just the way you are. And you don't have to change or impress anybody else. You just have to be yourself.
And to be happy with who yourself is, who you are. That's beautiful. Lotte, I really appreciate the insights you share at the end of each chapter in your wonderful memoir, Med School After Menopause, that provides so many important life lessons for its readers. And I also deeply appreciate how your story helps us to understand that life is eternal and does not end with the death of the physical body. Ma'am, you are an inspiration and a true healer, role modeling that it is never too late to transform one's life path. Thank you for sharing your remarkable story with all of us, and I thank you from my heart for this incredibly enlightening and fascinating interview today. And here's a loving reminder, everyone, that you can see the show notes and all Grief and Rebirth podcast episodes on ireneweinberg.com. And make sure to follow us and like us on social at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and especially on YouTube. Like, subscribe, hit notify to make sure you'll get the inspiring new interviews like this one with Dr. Lotte coming your way. Thank you so much. As I like to say, to be continued, many blessings. And bye for now.